Ooh, doggy, this finale was everything I could have hoped for and so much more. Well done on the part of Marvel for seeing this through the way that they did, because it took every expectation I could have had and made it sharpened it to a fine point almost. It made it so definitive. But no, let me just start off with the simplest part first. What happens between Mobius and Ravonna Renslayer? Mobius eventually confronts Ravonna, and he has one of the prune instincts. He's armed and ready, and she tries to call in her forces, but Hunter B-15 has led a lot of their staff to a different alternate timeline where, they actually run into another variant of Ravonna known as Rebecca Torment, who is a school principal, which, it helps to prove that they are all variants. Like, it's a beautiful way of doing this. It's just like the best way to prove that there are variants of them. It's just like, hey, here's a variant of our boss. Like, yo. And so Mobius and Ravonna are having this standoff where he's trying to advocate for free will, being able to do for what you want, not controlling people's lives. But Ravonna honestly just believes that maybe, doing that isn't the best course of action. She's unshakable in her feeling that just letting things just kind of fly off the handle is the worst possible outcome, because there would be chaos. There would be anarchy to a certain extent. That just letting the TVA just crumble away would be the worst possible outcome. Like, she feels it deep within herself. Cut over to the Citadel at the end of time. Oh, that is such a badass name. And Loki and Sylvie, they walk up to the door. And I love the way we're initially just introduced to the Citadel at the end of time, and just the end of time in general, where as the credits start to kind of roll, the logo for Marvel, you're hearing all these quotes from all these Marvel movies, and there's all these people from throughout history and all this stuff. It's such a beautiful setup, and like the colors and the Citadel itself just look amazing. It's just like a psychedelic trip almost. And Sylvie and Loki get to the door, and Sylvie's just like, she's taken in this moment because she's waited for this pretty much all her life of running, and she's finally taking control of everything. And then the doors just open, like they're being invited in, and it's just like, okay, what's going on? Should we be cautious? How do we handle this? How do we deal with this? They walk in, and bam, there's Miss Minutes. It's just like fucking jump scare. But Miss Minutes is just treating it like, oh, hey y'all, what's going on? Okay, so I know what you're here to do, but he Who Remains, yes, I love it, He Who Remains, because He Who Remains in the comics is the one who created the Timekeepers, honestly. And, it makes sense for them to be androids, because on that same token, them being androids, because they're a construct of He Who Remains in the comics. So why not make them actual synthetic beings for the most part? And so you have these synthetic beings that have been created by He Who Remains, and once you peel it all away, there he is at the end of time, because that's who Who Remains is, the person at the very end of time, the last guy standing. Love the connections to the comics, but it goes so much deeper. And Miss Minutes is just like, He Who Remains has offered to make it, tweak things a little so that you can both get what you want. Loki, you've always wanted to rule, so you get to rule. You get to defeat the Avengers. You get to kill Thanos. You can have the Infinity Gauntlet. You could have it all. And Sylvie, yes, Sylvie, of course. You want a normal life. You don't want to be constantly hunted and pursued and this, that, and the other. Done! We can wipe all those nasty, terrible memories away in an instant. You can have that peace of mind. You can have the life that you always wanted. You could be together. And it's just, I love that sales pitch. Oh, Tara Strong sells it so hard. That underlying bit of menace for the most part. And, it's funny, they reject her offer, and Miss Minutes goes back to Ravonna. And, before she had the whole situation with Mobius, Miss Minutes, who was asked to bring up everything she had on the creation of the TVA, I think it was the beginning of time, the end of time, all that good stuff. And Miss Minutes had brought her something else, something that He Who Remains had felt that it would be prudent for her to have. So I'm just like, is it setting up Ravonna to eventually be kind of like, Kang's wife, his partner, something along those lines? Because apparently she had to have read something that really just solidified her beliefs in everything. That's why when she met up with Mobius, she was so certain that ultimately there was something not right about what the two Lokis were doing at the end of time. So after rejecting Miss Minutes' offer, they continue on through the Citadel, and the door opens up, and it's just like, bang, there he is. It's Kang. Or is it? It's Jonathan Majors, and I'm just like, yes! It's unfortunate that he's ultimately not blue, but at the same time, it never really makes too much sense why he's blue in the comics. I mean, it's just an outfit. I mean, he's just a person, ultimately. So, just kind of cutting back on the makeup and all that good stuff. So that's not a terrible thing. And honestly, considering all the different variants of Kang don't always look like that, it makes sense as well. Because this Kang, it's obvious that this is the Kang that's kind of like the version of Immortus in the comics. Because Immortus is a version of Kang. Well, let me just back up on all that. I'll get to that in a moment. There's just so much to go over. And with this Kang, he invites them into an elevator to go up to his office. Of course, as they're riding in the elevator, Sylvie tries to just off him right there and then, and he's just, boop! He's just glitching around the place. He's basically using like one of those kind of reset bands, but it sets him to just out of reach whenever Sylvie goes in to strike him. Like he has it preset to know where she's going to try to strike him from. It's fun. It's absolutely delightful, and exactly the kind of thing that I would expect from Kang. Like, yes. And so they end up in his office. Sylvie's ready to just off him at every turn, but he just keeps booping right out of the way. I love the way Jonathan Majors plays this. He is so playful, like he is a god, like, basically. And it's funny because, Sylvie and Loki are gods, and yet they make it so that Jonathan Majors Kang feels like a friggin' trickster god for the most part. And he just sits him down, pours him some friggin' tea, like, hey, let me explain to you exactly what's going on here. He offers them basically his job at the end of time. And he explains exactly what he is. He says, hey, I'm from the 31st century, and, several different versions of me were from the 31st century. Way back during that time, I had discovered that there were different universes all stacked on top of each other, different timelines, so on and so forth. And, well, different versions of me also discovered that all at the same time. So eventually we all kind of met up, started sharing ideas, concepts, kind of created this harmony. Thing about that is, whereas some of us are protectors, others are conquerors. Ooh, yes, 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 yes. And, there were some who just wanted to dominate, saw the abilities and the technologies that we had as a way of just conquering all things throughout time, for all time, always. With name of the episode. I'm sorry, I had to work that in somewhere. But, he ultimately explains that there was chaos throughout all timelines. There was essentially a multiversal war, multiverse of madness, and eventually, one Kang had discovered this beast at the edge of time, Eliath, and, had managed to figure out a way to tame it and use it to his advantage, wiped out all the other Kangs, and essentially had created the TVA in order to make it so that no other Kangs would pop up and cause chaos. And so, for all this time, you've had this Kang at the end of time, making sure that no other Kangs would come into play to just break everything down and cause more destruction, more chaos, more madness. And I loved this explanation because it explains why we've never seen Kang before. We know his ways, we know what he does, but having it so that one Kang managed to just get rid of all those Kangs, and because Kang is kind of like a multiversal, for all time constant, he would just pop right back on up. But the best way to avoid having a Kang just pop up every few minutes is just to prune the timelines, make one streamlined timeline at the edge of time, and just make sure there are no deviations. Never give a moment for a Kang to just pop out of the woodworks and cause havoc. And, you see Loki, he's taking this all in like, okay, that would make sense, because if we end this guy, get rid of the TVA, boom, you got Kangs popping up all over the place. But, Kang here at the He Who Remains is just like, hey, why don't you take over my job? I'll give you this job, you run things the way you want to run it, why not? And continue on my mission, prevent more Kangs from popping up, because I'm old, baby. I'm centuries old. I'm millennia old. I'm tired of all of this. Why not just hand it over to people who are ambitious? Do my job, run it the way you want to run it, but just run it, because, you don't want the boogeyman Kangs coming out the yin-yang. But Sylvie, she is unconvinced. She believes that this guy might just be a liar at the end of time, that he's just trying to save his own skin. And, this He Who Remains is just like, I mean, it could be, you never know. And they reach a point where because he had known exactly what they do up until a certain point. Everything was kind of documented. Of course, he's at the end of time. Why wouldn't it be? But there was a certain point where he would not know what would happen after that. It's just like that we've reached the threshold. Beyond this point, anything could happen. And Sylvie, she's determined to kill him. She is just determined to kill him. And Loki, he stops her. He's just like, okay, no, wait, let's think about this for a minute. Like, what happens if he's telling the truth? What happens if, suddenly we have a whole horde of different problems out there? Because, and they say it in the episode, it works under the thought that, well, while, yes, there is just one guy here at the end of things running a bureaucracy that just stifles things, destroys innocent timelines, harms, this, that, and the other. But what if it could be so much worse? The power vacuum, the destruction, what if he's telling the truth? What if we just cause more problems than there ever were? And he's really considering this. He is thinking this through. He doesn't want to just, do things to cause mischief and mayhem. He wants to think this through. But Sylvie just feels like he's lying, that he just wants to rule, that he's just trying to save his own skin. And we get this fight scene. And this fight scene is actually really good. I'm gonna be real. Some of the fight scenes in this series have just not been that great. But this, they really worked on the choreography here, because this, the showdown between Sylvie and Loki, and there's a lot of passion and just anger as he's just constantly trying to stop her from, killing Kang, and they're using their magics against each other, levitating things, levitating each other, throwing each other back with magical blasts, and it's just like, yo! It's just like, my heart's pounding because the tension's just ramping up, and it gets to a point where she's almost ready to just end Kang, but Loki, steps in, he drops his weapon, and he's just like, please, listen to me, I need you to understand. He's desperately trying to get through to her, and they even had said at one point, like, why don't we see eye to eye on this? And he's just like, because you can't trust and I can't be trusted. It's just the way that we are. But he's desperately trying to get her to understand. And then it happens. He gets in close, he goes in for that kiss to just make sure that she's okay, because he cares. He cares. The one person in the world he just truly open up to, because she knows him. She is him. It's the wildest shiz ever, and just so many implications. It is so crazy. I didn't think it would actually go that way, but it did, and it's weird. But hey, might as well get weird, right? And it seems like she's calmed down. Like, maybe they could just think this through, just work it out. And no, she opens up a time door, throws him back into the TVA, and, he's just left there with his jaw on the floor. It's just like, ultimately, he opened up his heart, and he got betrayed, essentially. And Sylvie goes in for the kill, and, she does question. It's just like, aren't you gonna beg for your life? And He Who Remains is just like, I mean, I could, but nah. And then she does the deed, takes her blade, plunges it into his heart, stomach, whatever, and he's just simply like, see you later, and he dies. He just dies there, and I'm just like, yo! Never before have I seen a situation where you kill the main adversary and you just unleash something far worse, and that worst thing is him. And I loved it. I loved it so much. I loved it. Like, yo, what a payoff. And even worse, because Sylvie she starts to cry, she breaks down for the most part, because, I mean, she's done it. She did the deed. It's done. But it really does raise the question of, like, well, now what for Sylvie? You did it. You killed him off. But what's she going to do now, Sylvie? And, Loki, he's back in the TVA. Hunter, B-15, and Mobius are monitoring things, seeing all these branches to spiral out of the timeline and all that good stuff. And, they're just like, does he just want us to keep letting him grow at this rate? And then Loki comes running up. He tries to explain, like, what happens. I was at the Citadel at the end of time. There was a man there, a terrible man. He told us all these things, and there's going to be a legion of his variants coming out of the Wing Wang. We got to prepare. We got to get ready. And Mobius is just like, who are you? Are you an analyst? And B-15 starts calling people over to where they are. And Loki kind of realizes that this isn't the TVA that he knew. It's a whole nother TVA. One, and you see it, whereas the Timekeepers were the ones, with the statues and in charge of, the original TVA he was at. He looks over and he sees a statue of Kang the Conqueror. And it's just like, boom, it just ends right there. And I'm just like, yo, oh shit, everything pops up off now. Because the difference with Kang is that he could be an enemy in every Marvel movie at this point, and it would just be an alternate version of Kang. You could have Kang just running throughout the MCU, and the whole goal at this point is just to stop all of it, to end all of them, because just nothing but issues from here on out of Kang's just popping up and causing chaos, trying to conquer all time, throughout time, always. It's going to be chaos. It's going to be madness. It's going to be Quantumania. Like, I just loved this setup. Like, it just, yes, this is exactly it. Like, thank you, Marvel, for just not subverting anything, for not deviating too hard. You took what was in the comics and you made it work. This is the most workable way of introducing Kang and showing why he had never shown up before and why he's going to just start showing up now. And it's going to be so out of control because it's obvious there were branched timelines before that, ultimately weren't going to lead into too much trouble because, the Avengers had to go back in time, they mucked with some stuff and caused a few issues, but now, this is going to be all over the place. And, certain things, I think it kind of shows why Loki was allowed to kind of come into being. And that timeline was able to be created because it was supposed to happen. Because He Who Remains wanted to have this Loki there at the end of time to make this choice. And he made his choice, Sylvie made her choice. And apparently it's to be continued in Season 2. Because Loki will apparently return in Season 2. And I'm just like, oh man, it's going to get wild. I know so many people were not really gelling with, I think it was episode 3 where we, just spent some time with Loki and Sylvie, but that was just to build up their relationship. If they just suddenly came out of nowhere just loving each other, embracing each other and all that, it wouldn't make any sense. But with this, everything just flowed together so well. This is my favorite of these Marvel series so far. And that's not to say that the others weren't good. It's just that this one managed to make itself work throughout. It just made it work. And I have to applaud everyone who worked on this. Well done. You managed to craft one of the best Marvel stories out there. This was fantastic. Well done. Oh, jeez. What a noteworthy thing of just capping things off. And so much is going to spiral out of this. I cannot wait. Yes, give me Kang. Let the Kang dynasty come in. I'm riding the high off of this last episode. Like no other series has just, I've ended it and I've just felt so euphoric at the end of it. Like my endorphins are pumping full on after all of this. Like I've only felt this way like at the end of Daredevil basically. Like it's just that good. Such a finely crafted story. Mwah. And it left so many things open. Like thank you for leaving enough threads open that so much more could happen later down the line. And I have to hope that Season 2 ends up being just as strong as all of this because dang, like y'all nailed it for me. But tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. Were you feeling this as hard as I was feeling this? Because, I might call the police for how badly I'm feeling this. Because it's just like, dude, this should be illegal how well I feel about all of this. But I thought this was a fantastically crafted story, and I want to hear from you. Did you think it was as good as I did? What was your favorite aspect of it? Were you happy to see Kang, all these people speculating on it, and we actually got it right. We weren't just subverted at the end. It was Kang all along. Thank you. And it was so great to see Jonathan Majors showing off, like, what we can kind of expect and what we shouldn't expect at the same time, because there'll be variants, different versions of Kang. It's going to be so wild. But if you like this review, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications. And until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and I will see you later. For all time, always.